Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and this is the Rubicon Kettenkrad that I built up last week. If you'd like to see how I put it together and the silly modular base I put together for it, there's a link in the description, unless I forget to put the link in the description, which I often do until someone reminds me. Well, this week in part 2 I'm going to put some paint on the model and see if I can't make it look as good as such a nice model deserves. I often don't fully glue models together until I've finished painting them, and in this case the whole thing comes apart in quite a few pieces. The Kettenkrad separates from the base, and the tracks separate from the body of the vehicle. In addition, the Goliath mine that I did glue to its trailer didn't stick very well, and so that's removable now as well, I guess. There is of course also the Goliath operators, but those are from a separate kit, and so I'll paint them off camera. Getting stuck into the main body of the vehicle, I have chosen to use this pale blue-grey on all of my German vehicles, the fourth army that I'm building for bolt action now. Thinning this paint quite heavily means that it'll take a few good coats to get an opaque base coat. However, I stopped a little short as the weathering techniques I'm using later on can take advantage of an imperfect base coat. I mixed a little black into my blue-grey and started stippling around the model. I had originally hoped to make something approaching a modulation technique, which is a style that I used in the American half-track video, but unfortunately my brush had other ideas. This is a very old brush, well past its life for detail work, but stippling is within its capabilities. Before I totally gave up on the modulation style, I tried to come back and reinforce the middle of each panel with the original blue-grey by itself. And that did help, but it maybe wasn't quite as strong as I had planned. I also gave a pure white edge highlight at this step, but there's a wash later on, and so that will be strongly muted. The Rubicon kit came with a transfer sheet, or decal, or decal, however you'd like to pronounce that. Go have a fight about it in the comments below. I won't be using some of the symbols, but I'll make use of the license plates for starters. I've never been much of a fan of transfers. They're always a little too fiddly and shift around and leave a strong edge. But they are quicker than freehanding and often finer detail than I can render with a brush. The German bar cross, or Balkenkreuz, marks this as a Luftwaffe vehicle, probably used as an airfield tow. And lastly, a diamond R on the back, which signifies this as being part of a paratroop unit, I think. Although possibly the two markings there shouldn't be on the same vehicle, but it's too late to change it now. There's not a whole lot of details on this model to paint separately, mainly some leather and wood, which I painted with a dark brown and poked at it with a lighter brown just to give it some worn fabric effect. The front tyre got just black paint, and I realised I could put some of the leftover black and brown mixed together around the lower parts of the model, and particularly the track guards, to give it a bit of extra weathering. And then to ruin all of my hard work, an all over black ink wash, acting as both a filter to darken the whole model, but also picking out some of the recesses of the model far faster than I can do by hand. Now that the body is mostly painted, I can finish off the tracks, and so I can put those on. The interleaved road wheels are just the same process I've shown for the body, but for the tracks, I want to try something new. I've seen a few people in different videos painting tracks in brown rather than silver metallic or black and grey like I usually do. As you can see, I've cheated by mixing a little bit of black and silver and brown all together, so I'm not just totally painting something new, but hopefully that extra colour will give the model a little bit more of an interesting tone. I also realised that the road wheels each have tyres, which are extremely tiny and partially obscured. I gave it my best shot, and anywhere I kind of messed up, I repainted with the appropriate colours. I wasn't totally convinced at the brown tracks at this point, and so I gave it just a partial coat of some silver metallic by itself. This is heavier than a dry brush or an edge highlight, but not total coverage, and so a lot of that brown mix is still visible. And I wanted to see how all of that looked, and so I glued the tracks onto the Kettenkrad. I did do a little bit of stippling to hide the nasty marks from the wash, and some more edge highlighting. Of course, you can't stop me. I decided that the trailer, being probably issued along with the Kettenkrad, would also probably be the same colour pattern, and so that got the same paint scheme, and you don't need to see it again, so I'll skip ahead. More interestingly, the Goliath mine I will paint differently. In all of the museum examples that I've seen, the Goliath is always tan. Now I'm sure there are other examples in different paint schemes, possibly even camouflage, but I kinda like the look in tan, and so I went with it. In terms of technique, this is actually identical to the Kettenkrad itself, starting with just a few layers of tan, but not enough for a perfect base coat, and then mixing in a darker colour, in this case brown, for some stippling. And then the whole thing got a brown ink wash, and finally some edge highlighting to clean it up. The tracks also got an identical process to the Kettenkrad, that same mix of black, brown and silver, with then a little bit of extra silver on top. This really did make the Goliath look pretty good, so I'm going to need to come up with some excuse to paint something else in these colours again. I actually think it looks nicer than the Kettenkrad that's towing it, but maybe that's just because I really like sandy tan colours. The last part of the Rubicon kit that I'll be painting today is the Kettenkrad's rider. Now the kit does include 2 passengers and a supply cart, and I will make use of those someday, but for the moment they'll sit happily in the bits box. And the rider by far got the simplest of schemes, although it does include paint mixing, which many wargamers seem to be allergic to, so there's that, I guess. I had the idea that the rider is a mechanic, halfway through maintaining the vehicle when it suddenly needed to pull the Goliath mine. And so what I wanted for him is to have a dark green mechanic's overall, not quite what my bright earthy green looks like. And so, very simply, I mixed a little bit of black into it, which has the effect of both darkening the green but also desaturating the green, and that worked nicely. For a highlight, I then mixed a lighter green into that mix, and what that means is there's still a little bit of black in the highlights, keeping it desaturated, and while brighter, it's not too bright. The last part of the model is the base, and unfortunately I wasn't really very confident about this, and so I didn't film a lot of it. I started with sand as I had intended to make a gravel base, broken masonry and other rubble sort of stuff. But with the Kettenkrad being a light grey essentially by itself, I wasn't really sure I wanted to go in that direction because the Kettenkrad would just disappear into the monotone of the whole scene. And so instead of that, I brought out my clump foliage and grass flock, as well as a quite janky static grass applicator. And almost immediately I realised that none of this was looking very good at all. The clumps of green were just this bright, overly saturated green. And so what I did was I muted it down with the brown wash and also gave it a dry brush of the light green. However, I didn't wait for the wash to dry before I did the dry brush, and so it's mixed together, forming a lot of various tones, and that makes it look a bit more natural. And while I do want to come back and improve the base a little bit, for the moment, it does mean the set is complete, in all its many modular pieces. The Kettenkrad can be used by itself and looks the part with just a simple paint scheme. The Goliath mine on the larger base can be fitted with the Kettenkrad for gaming when the team are being transported, and when they dismount, the team can be put on the base and the Kettenkrad drives off, leaving them looking the best of the lot. Or at least when I finish off that base they will. I'm thinking some twigs and maybe a squirrel. But for now, that's all I have. If you have any suggestions for the base, do pop them in the comment section below, and check the description box on the way past. I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.